Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's 50 years ago this month. This time around, we're talking about May 1972, and it's a wonderful group. We're going to look at the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 and do some cherry picking from the top 40 as well. As always, we have a playlist of all the songs that we talk about, so you'll want to check that out. And Steve, you want to start us off?
Yeah, it's such an interesting month that so mid-May 1972, we've got Roberta Flack with her monster hit, The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, which dominates the charts for weeks on end. Really, it's the song that really made, I think, Flack's career. It's magnificent. At number 2, we have Joe Tex with I Gotcha. Which I know Dave is a song that's somewhat close to your heart. You like the song.
Just the title gets you going. Gotcha.
Yeah, so there we go. I think Joe Tex is a bit more consequential figure than some of his songs would indicate, but there he is at number 2 with I Gotcha. At number 3, then we have the Chi-Lites from Chicago with Oh Girl. And I think it's fair to say that Oh Girl is the song that the Chi-Lites are most known for. The Chi-Lites had a lot of success on the R&B charts for a number of years, but this is their really big pop hit. It reaches number 1. The Chi-Lites are a group, a vocal group that their origins date back to the late 50s in Chicago. When they all attended the same high school. They had, again, quite a bit of success in the 1960s, mostly regional success, but they did make some waves on the R&B charts. But in the early 1970s, then the Chi-Lites have a couple of really big songs. They have You Seen Her from the previous year, and then of course this one, Oh Girl. Oh Girl is penned by Eugene Record, who was the sort of the lead figure in the Chi-Lites, and he's also the person who's on lead vocal. I think, though, what makes the song is really the magnificent harmonica of Marshall Thompson. It's a really plaintive, kind of lovely number, and again, it's immediately recognizable, and it's the Chi-Lites. No question, it's the Chi-Lites high water mark. I'd say one other thing about this is that it was in fact covered then years later by an English artist, Paul Young, in the early 1990s. And it was a big hit around the world, and in the United States, his version of Oh Girl peaked at number 8. But there you have it. So at number 3, you've got the Chi-Lites from Chicago with Oh Girl. Boy, at number 4 is a really interesting group who were enormously popular and enormously influential in this decade. And at number 4, you've got the Staple Singers with I'll Take You There.
Right, and okay, this is a family group, but certainly different than the Osmonds or the Jacksons.
Right.
They have been singing together publicly since 1950, and of course, they started off as a gospel group. Gospel and folk was a big part of their repertoire, and they never really ever entirely departed from that. This song too, I'll Take You There, is it's more of a soul song, but there's definitely a gospel element to it.
Yeah.
And I'll take you there. Where are you going to take me? Well, heaven, paradise, possibly, but it's also important to know that this group was the entire family was a family of activists for the civil rights.
Yes.
Pops Staples was a good friend of Martin Luther King. Also in the folk scene, it's said that Bob Dylan asked for Mavis's hand. So activism folk was also a big part of the mix. And we talked a couple months ago about their first hit from this album, which was Be Altitude, Respect Yourself.
All right.
And that was Respect Yourself. and both of these songs, Respect Yourself and I'll Take You There, have a message about how to be positive, working for social change, and just with the mindset, we're going to get there, we're on our way, take my hand and, and help me, I'll take you there. Fantastic. For me, Mavis Staple, she's my favorite soul singer. Sure. I just think she's fantastic. Sure. And listening to this song, like from the first notes, it's just a feel-good song.
Absolutely.
And, from the first to the last. Now, this was released in February 1972, peaked at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it was ranked as the number 19 song for 1972. The band was Muscle Shoals rhythm section.
Of course.
So we had Eddie Hinton on guitar, also solo guitar, David Hood on bass, Roger Hawkins drums, Barry Beckett on the Wurlitzer, Jimmy Johnson and Raymond Bangs contributed miscellaneous guitar parts. The horns and strings were arranged by Johnny Allen and were recorded at Artie Field's recording studios in Detroit. Terry Manning, who also did the overdubbed and mixed the album in Memphis, played harmonica and lead electric guitar on this. Terry Manning is somebody that we might need to talk about in a little more detail at some point on our behind the scenes, behind the curtain series. But so you had people, the best of the best working on this. And of course, it was written by Albertus Isbell. Do you know who that is?
It's a familiar name, but I'm not going to be able to help you with it. Now, who is that? Go ahead. Who is that?
It's familiar because he took parts of that name as his artist name, which is Al Bell. And I know you know Al Bell.
Yeah.
All right. So former disc jockey in his hometown of Little Rock.
That's right.
He went on to become the vice president and co-owner, along with the founders, Jimmy Stewart and his sister, Estelle Axton, of Stax Records.
Stax Records, that's right. Oh, yeah.
And that was during the latter half of the label's 19-year existence. They had just broken with Atlantic Records after having been royally screwed on record rights, on song rights, right?
Yeah.
So his mission was to rebuild a catalog for Stax that actually would belong to Stax.
Yeah.
Then, and he did an amazing job. And under his leadership, Stax became the second largest Black-owned record company in America.
Yeah,
after Motown, right?
After Motown, I think you can make a strong argument for Memphis, Tennessee, as being sort of one of the heartbeats of American music in this era. Whether it's the American Recording Studio, what was the legendary Sun Studios, that we've talked about before, or of course Stax. I mean, it's just, you talk about what Memphis is, where a lot of action is in this era. It's fascinating, really important city.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Beale Street, the whole.
Oh,
bit.
Yeah.
So Memphis is one of the music capitals of America. Al Bell wrote and produced this. He was very influential in taking the Staple Singers to a new level in terms of their popularity and marketability, way beyond the simple gospel and folk target audiences. So that's I'll take you there. And
it's it's a
fantastic song.
It's a fantastic song. Staple Singers are as consequential a group as it existed in the early 1970s, whether it was the R&B, the gospel, the pop charts, they were everywhere. Amazingly, Staple Singers are one of the highlights of the band's final
Oh,
Final Concerts, the Last Waltz. I mean, their participation is just astonishing.
it's astonishing.
Yeah,
It's so amazing to see their performance in that.
and Mavis Staples is still with us and still tours. She's currently, I think, on tour with Bonnie Raitt. She's
The last survivor of the.
it's just the Staples singers. I mean, we're not really plowing a new furrow here, but they are just extraordinary. And you talk again, like you're suggesting, so influential, and they're so intertwined with the politics of the era. And to some degree, sort of this notion of sort of Black empowerment in terms of the recording industry, all of that. It's
Absolutely.
just they're in the middle of it. Oh, it's great. Staple singers are fantastic. So as on we go. At number 5, then in mid-May is Michael Jackson's version of Rockin' Robin, which we talked about last month. We have at number 6, Philadelphia's the Stylistics, Betcha by Golly Wow. So there we go there with the Stylistics, and then. At number 7, the amazing one, the one, the only, the Reverend Al Green, at Look What You've Done for Me, again at number 7. I think Al Green is sort of at his imperial phase in the early 1970s. He's just omnipresent, and everything he's putting together is just amazing. Look What You've Done for Me, penned by Green, by Al Jackson Jr. Al Jackson, who of course was the drummer in Booker T and the MGs. Hugely influential in the music industry at this time, died way too soon in 1975. Alongside then, Willie Mitchell helped pen this. Willie Mitchell, who was, quite frankly, a legend in Memphis. It's, like so many of these songs, there's a kind of interesting backstory. And the backstory for Look What You've Done for Me is that it was, of course, a B-side, right? It was the B-side for Green's Layla for You. And again, as so many times this happened, right? DJs, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we like the B-side better. And so there you go. It peaks at number 4 on the pop charts and number 2 on the R&B charts. It's drawn from his I'm Still in Love with You LP, which was a massive record in 1972. Hitting number 4 on the Billboard 200. I mean, Al Green sold a lot of records in the early 1970s. I mean, 1972 was a very important year for Al Green. Look What You've Done for Me, I'm Still in Love with You, You Ought to Be With Me. These are all top 5 pop hits. It's just, it's interesting. We talk about the staple singers, and then we talk about Al Green. I mean, these are performers that still matter in the 21st century.
Oh yeah,
it's just really it's really something.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, it's interesting when we look back at this and to see who still matters. And if you watch like YouTubes of these artists and read the comments, they have a fan base that, if anything, has expanded.
I think that there's something to that,
and that's incredible. So
it is incredible as new generations rediscover their music. I mean, there's a certain timeless quality, obviously, to Al Green's music. Certainly, that's the same case with the staple singers. It's also, I don't know. There's just something, there's something very powerful, very plaintive, very personal in the way Al Green's able to interpret songs, and so. I guess it's on some level a little surprised that he became as popular as he did, but he crossed racial groups. He was just an enormously popular and influential figure in this time. And I think, he's one of the greats of all time, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1995. I mean, Al Green is majestic in almost every way. And so there we have it at number 7. Look What You've Done for Me. At number 8, we have, of course, the Queen of Soul's Daydreaming, which we talked a bit about last month. She is, she's really at the height of her powers in the early 1970s, I would argue. And then, boy, at number 9, this is really kind of an interesting twist in all of this. And so the Beatles have broken up. They're operating as solo acts. And then here we go. We've got one Ringo Starr with Back Off Boogaloo.
Yeah, Back Off Boogaloo was released as a single. Was never part of a studio album.
Right.
Was written by Ringo Starr, and surprise, George Harrison, produced by Harrison. A lot of fans are pretty sure that this was intended as a jab at McCartney. Of course, they were going through some fairly bitter legal battles at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And some people thought that most of the Beatles were fairly unimpressed with McCartney's early solo work. And they probably were. Whether that was fair or not is a different question. But we have stuff like this. Wake up, meathead, don't pretend you are dead. Get yourself up off the cart. Don't pretend you're dead. A lot of people think that that's a reference to the Paul is
Yes,
dead
Paul's dead,
rumors. And then in the middle eight, get yourself together now and give me something tasty. Everything you try to do, you know, it sure sounds wasted. So Starr always denied that. He said it had nothing to do with McCartney, but it's hard to believe that it had nothing to do with McCartney, right? But what Ringo himself said was that this song was inspired by Mark Bolan.
Yes.
They were hanging out of T-Rex, right?
Yeah.
They were hanging out a lot at that time. Ringo was hanging with people like
Harry Nilsson and well, you got Nilsson, you got Joe.
Yeah. So anyway,
Joe Cocker, all sorts of people. Yeah.
His drinking buddies, right?
Right.
So
Keith Moon.
Over dinner one evening, Bolan had been using the word Boogaloo like all through dinner, all through. It's just for everything. Starr says, you'd ask, do you want some potatoes? And he'd say, ooh, you Boogaloo. So kind of strange, but he was just throwing that out there a lot. And the beat and the melody for the song came to Ringo overnight, and he recalled that he had to take batteries out of some of the kids' toys in order to power up a tape recorder to record the new song that was going through his head. But the band members for this, the people who played on it, and this was shortly after the concert for Bangladesh.
Right.
So you had George Harrison, and his slide guitar on Back Off Boogaloo is one of the really distinct elements of this song.
Sure.
Gary Wright was also there, and the omnipresent Klaus Voormann, who actually produced the B-side of this single, which was Blind Man. Blind Man was the theme song for a Western movie that Starr had a starring role in 1971. And for the B-side, they were assisted by Pete Ham of Badfinger, right?
Badfinger, yeah.
Anyway, so this was recorded on March 17th, like I said, shortly after the concerts. Released February 1972, and it then appeared on all sorts of compilation albums after that.
That's right.
Blast from Your Past, Photograph, the very best of Ringo Starr. He remastered it as a bonus track on his Goodnight Vienna album that he re-recorded with Harry Nilsson, 1981. No, I'm sorry. What he re-recorded with Harry Nilsson was the Stop and Smell the Roses track.
Yeah.
So this was, that incorporated lyrics from Beatles songs like With a Little Help from My Friends, Good Day Sunshine, Baby You're a Rich Man, Lady Madonna, things like that. And then he also recorded it for Give Me More Love. So it was not on any album, but he just milked the hell out of it. And
Sure.
and of course, this is a staple of his concerts as well. Whenever he's out with
there we go
with the All-Stars.
The All-Stars. I think you can make an argument. think you make an argument that in the early 70s, it's Ringo who's the most. Some of Ringo's singles are the best of the former Beatles. I think we'll see that more fully next year when his Ringo album is released and Photograph is on it. But as you know, Ringo is never far from his friends, including the lads from Liverpool, and so which I think was strategically. I mean, I think that there was a great bond there, but I also think strategically, Ringo knew that these guys knew what they were doing, and so. You're right. I mean, it doesn't really matter the year. Ringo is recording with his friends and oftentimes with the former Beatles. It's just so how this all went down back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And Harrison was very, very much a part of that. Was very influential
Always, yes.
in getting Ringo his songs and getting them out. And he didn't get any credit back early on in the days. The first couple of hits that Ringo did were at the very least, co-penned by George Harrison, and the music was heavily Harrison.
Oh, absolutely.
Influenced, so
yeah.
But that credit came later, and we all know the part he played. It's strange that. By this point, all the Beatles had solo hits, right?
That's right.
But arguably, the two that were getting out of the gate fastest and were producing the most interesting stuff were the two that most people probably would have least reckoned with.
Oh, I think you're right. No, I think you're absolutely correct. But I think it's also, I think, almost unarguable that those singles from Harrison and those singles from Ringo are really, they're outstanding. They're just really outstanding, and much more palatable than some of the work that McCartney was putting out as singles in this era. I mean, obviously McCartney would hit his stride once again with the public in the mid 1970s. But yeah, there was big. Ringo was big,
or more palatable than Lennon's heavily politicized stuff. Power to
well, I think that's fine.
Like
that. You're right. No question about that.
So Ringo was doing well for himself. This was arguably 71, 70 to 73, really his time to shine.
No question. I mean, that you're right. I mean, if you go to see the All-Star Band today in the 21st century, the songs that Ringo will sing will be, again, songs from the Beatles era and then songs then from this early 70s output, as he was a singles artist working closely with Harrison.
Some people critiqued this song, said it was very repetitive. It is really repetitive. There's no question about it.
Yes, it is.
But responding to that, he said, "Show me a pop song that isn't."
Well, there you go. Well, there's something to be said, right? I mean, that's
right. Said about that.
There was something said. So there we have it. Number 9, Back Off Boogaloo from Ringo. At number 10, then finishing out the top 10 is America's big single, "Horse with No Name," sort of almost in a way, I guess, kind of career-defining single. But you have the American expats who joined forces while living in England, and "Horse with No Name." Let's cherry pick a little bit from the rest of the top 40. At number 11, then you have the Rolling Stones with "Tumbling Dice." This is, I think, by almost any measure, this is considered sort of a Stones classic for a number of reasons. The beat, the groove, it's fantastic. The musicianship is loose and very Stones-ish. I mean, there's just something about this that is, I mean, the lyrics is, I mean, it's just, yes, this is, when you talk about your great Stones songs, this is clearly one of them. Penned, of course, by Jagger and Richards, the Glimmer Twins. It was recorded both in France and then topped off at Sunset Studio in Hollywood, and produced, as most of their songs were in this era, by the legendary Jimmy Miller, who I just learned, I should have known this, but he is the stepbrother of Judith Miller, who Judith Miller was a reporter for the New York Times. This has nothing to do with the Rolling Stones. She was a reporter for the New York Times during the Iraqi war era, quite controversial reporter in some quarters, and they were were stepbrother, stepsister. I had no idea. So anyway, so Jimmy Miller's production.
Okay.
One of the things that's sort of interesting about this song is the absence of Bill Wyman. Bill Wyman not at this particular set of recording sessions, and so you have Mick Taylor on both guitar and bass. Jagger contributes vocals and also rhythm guitar. There aren't that many songs that Jagger actually plays guitar on. True. As well, of course, there's with Richards and of course Charlie White. On piano is the legendary Nicky Hopkins, who great session player and spent a lot of time with the Stones. And then of course you have
a lot of touring with them too, right?
A lot of touring with them as well. And then of course, speaking of touring with them, you have then on sax Bobby Keys, who's ostensibly a kind of whatever adjunct member of the Stones. It's the musicianship is loose. There's a certain kind of I don't know, almost a kind of sloppiness to it, but it's sort of what makes the song. It was, of course, it's been covered by lots of people over the years. Most notably, I suspect Linda Ronstadt, who had some success with it in the late 1970s, with her version topped it at number 32. This single from the Stones topped in the US at number 7. It comes from their Exile on Main Street album, which was released roughly about this time 50 years ago. Man, you talk about an album that cuts both ways. There are some of the best songs the Stones ever put on vinyl and some of the worst songs. And so it's fascinating to read the comments about the album and its release 50 years ago, because there are people they love parts of the album, but they also hate parts of the album. It's just it's not, for many people, I think it's sort of a difficult album to completely embrace. But you have the Stones then, again, at sort of the heights of their powers in the early 1970s with Tumbling Dice.
Yeah, and Exile on Main Street is clearly one of the classics as well. It's become one of the.
I think it is. I mean, there's no question about that. But there's also, I think, there was a certain lack of discipline amongst the Stones in this era, and there weren't many people telling the Stones no. And so, for the reflection, I think there's some things on it that aren't great. But it comes from the Mick Taylor era, and I mean, I'm such a Mick Taylor fan. I think this is the Stones at their height, and Mick Taylor's. His playing is just sublime. It's just there's nothing he can't play, and he just really added something to the Stones that was sorely missing in the late 1960s, and so it's just magnificent. So you have Tumbling Dice at number 11. At number 12, then you have Don McLean, who had a monster hit a few months earlier with American Pie, of course.
Right.
And at number 12 is really interesting number, Vincent, Starry, Starry Night.
Yeah, absolutely. This was written by McLean. A quote. I was sitting on the veranda one morning reading a biography of Van Gogh, and suddenly I knew I had to write a song arguing that he wasn't crazy. So I sat down with a print of Starry Night and wrote the lyrics out on a paper bag. That's the origin story of this. And I think there are two songs on American Pie which are indispensable. And apart from American Pie, this is the second.
I would agree.
And I really don't care much for any of the rest. I think these are the two songs that you need to know from Don McLean. He had a hit later on with Crying, just abysmal from my point of view, but
Roy Orbison cover, right? Yeah.
But this is sublime. I just think this Vincent is a wonderful song. This was produced by Ed Freeman. American Pie was his second studio album. Do you know which the first one was?
No, I don't know what the first one was.
Who does, right? But it was called Tapestry from 1970.
Okay. Right.
All right. So I think that probably that predated Carole King's Tapestry.
Probably.
I think that's was released before. So, but she probably wasn't familiar with it.
Probably not. No, I think that's fair. Yeah.
This was released February 1972. It topped the UK singles charts for 2 weeks. In the United States, it peaked at number 12. Was number 2 on the easy listening chart, and Billboard ranked it as the number 94 song for 1972.
That's it.
There you go. You know.
Yeah. Does it seem a touch cloying, a little maudlin, or is that for you? Does it work? For me, I'm always been a little split on the song because there's something about it that just seems. Well, I mean, it's poignant, but it's also maybe a little goes just off, takes a step in the wrong direction for me.
I think it's clear that I have a higher tolerance for that sort of thing than you do.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, I think that's right. No, well, that sums up a lot of things. Well, we're glad we got that cleared up. Yeah, well, it's and I remember this as a kid that I didn't know much about the artist. I mean, the artist that's familiar, but it sort of, in a weird way, sort of led me into the Dutch artist painting, into his career. It's
okay.
I'm sure for lots of people, this was, I think a surprise on some level that this was a real individual, and led them down that path, which is, I mean, I think always useful.
Well, that may be true.
That maybe says a little something about my lack of education in the early 1970s. Maybe this.
I think. Well, I'm going out on a limb here, but I think the level of art education in America in general.
Well, there we go.
Isn't particularly high. So
yeah, I think that's well. So you have at number 12, then we have Vincent from Don McLean. At number 13, a very different kind of record. It's from this kind of loose association of musicians, most, I think, closely associated with Western swing for a number of decades. It's Commander Cody and his Lost Planet Airmen with their version of Charles Ryan's Hot Rod Lincoln. It's a boisterous song. It's a raucous song. It's the only hit that the Commander ever had, and it peaks at number 9 on the pop charts. I think it's fair to say that that there's always been, well, there's definitely a kind of regional connotation when it comes to Western swing. This is the music of Texas, this is the music of the Southwest. Famously, of course, it's Bob Wills. Later, that mantle was carried by groups like Asleep at the Wheel, and then again, Commander Cody. The Commander was George Frayne, who just passed away in 2021. But the group was most notably involved people like John Tickey and again Bill Kirchen on lead guitar, who's ripping it up in this particular song. It's almost a kind of parody song. There's a certain kind of lightness to it, but it was a big song for Commander Cody, and it's safe to say that during their heyday of the 70s into the 80s and even into the 90s, this group had an enormously loyal following. And so you wouldn't think it, given their absence of chart success, either on the pop or the country charts, but the Commander, they could pack them in, and Western swing has its fans, and nobody did it better than Commander Cody. And so at number 13, we've got Hot Rod Lincoln. Well, this is a very different song. It's transitioned completely. We'll now become a bit more reverential. At number 15, this is it's a very interesting song and a very interesting backstory. This is Cat Stevens and Morning Has Broken.
Yeah, right. And we've talked before about how in the early 70s, there's kind of a revival of religious
yes, absolutely,
feeling in pop that it's come to be seen as hip,
yes,
to be Christian. So this kind of fits into that, and I had always assumed that this was written by Cat Stevens, which is not the case.
Not the case. Yeah.
This was first published in 1931 as a Christian hymn, words by English author Eleanor Fargion,
Right.
and it was set to the traditional Scottish Gaelic tune, Bunesan, I guess is how it's pronounced. It was often sung in children's services and in funerals. So it's no accident that this is hymn-like. It was intended to be a hymn. Was produced by Paul Samuel Smith. Does that ring a bell for you?
Ooh, it does ring a bell. I am, again, as usual, not going to be able to come up with anything, but that's definitely a familiar name.
Okay.
Why should we know?
Bassist and co-founder of the Yardbirds.
Oh, goodness, of course.
And produced a lot of Cat
Lots.
Stevens stuff,
That's right.
including the soundtrack to Harold and Maude.
That's right. Yeah.
But he is known for producing a lot of different artists. This particular song was released on Stevens' fifth studio album, Teaser and the Firecat, recorded March 1971 and released in January 7th, 1972, and covered by everybody and their dog, right?
Oh, absolutely.
From New Seekers, Julie Collins, Neil Diamond, Art Garfunkel, Frida of ABBA, Mormon Tabernacle Choir, Aaron DeVille, Kenny Rogers in the first edition, Roger Whittaker, and on and on and on.
And sung around campfires at church camps for around the world, right? This was just
right.
This is just part of
part
of the canon in a way. Yeah, right.
Absolutely. Interestingly, the piano that is
oh yes, it's great.
So much a part of this song was arranged and performed by Rick Wakeman. That's right. Of Yes. Prior to the actual recording, Stevens had heard Wakeman playing something in the recording booth, and it was a rough sketch of what was to become Catherine Howard. Stevens said, "Oh, he liked it. He would like something similar,
right.
The opening and the end, maybe even the middle." But Wakeman told him, "This is a piece that I'm doing for a solo album." Stevens was able to persuade him to make some adaptions for his piece.
Yeah.
And Wakeman was thanked for this by, he was supposed to be paid £10 for his work on this song, but the work was never credited.
Never credited. This is the issue, right?
And he didn't even get his £10.
Oh God, oh my. There we go.
So many years later, decades later, Yusuf Islam, who is the new name for Cat Stevens, ended up paying him the money because Wakeman complained about this publicly around 2000, and said it had just been an oversight on the part of the record company, a misunderstanding, blah blah blah. And I don't know if he ended up paying him £10 or
I suspect not,
or something more.
I suspect not, but yeah,
more reasonable. But that was an oversight that got corrected a few decades after the fact.
Yeah, it's and Wakeman's one of the great storytellers, and he talks with you. One of the things that makes Wakeman's solo concert so interesting is that in between his numbers, he just spins these yarns, and he's quite fond of talking about this particular event. Wakeman is, in addition to his playing with the Strops and of course with Yes in his solo work, he was involved in a lot of sessions in this era. I mean, he's a very versatile player. And so if you dig deep enough in lots of songs that are very familiar, you're going to see Rick Wakeman's name. It's Cat Stevens, of course, famously converts to Islam and then takes 20 or so years off of his career. But if you dig into his output in the early 70s, many of his songs have there's a certain kind of religious kind of searching nature to them. And he's a spiritual guy, and he was a spiritual guy. It seems really from the beginning. And I mean, this song certainly highlights that. It's It's one of his great numbers, and it has, I think, as you suggested earlier, really sort of entered the canon of popular music as just one of those songs that everybody at least knows a little bit of. It's just, it seems like it's been around forever.
Right. And strangely enough, it peaked at number 6. As big as it is, as big as it's
right.
It made the top 10, but it never, never peaked at.
Honestly, yes, that's right. You would have thought that it would have been much bigger than that, even. But it has this quality that, again, the timeless quality that allows it to be, a popular song even in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Well, so cherry pick a little bit more. We've got Paul Simon at number 24 with a really exuberant Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard.
Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, fantastic. Produced, written and sung by Simon, of course. This was on his second solo album, which is a bit misleading because
well, it is.
This is the first solo album after Simon and Garfunkel, and his first solo album at all was actually, they had already recorded Wednesday morning at 2 a.m., but hadn't really gone anywhere. And he was in England and recorded it in England, and was just, maybe hoping for some solo success. The Paul Simon Songbook was the one and that was released in 1965, shortly before Simon and Garfunkel just took off and became megastars.
That's right. Yeah.
That was released by Columbia CBS in the UK. So this was released 7 years later, May 1972, also Columbia, peaked at number 22 on the Hot 100. And it's a strange little song about his mother seeing something in the schoolyard that he and Julio were doing that was illegal. Now, I always assumed, it was never clarified, and he never said for certain what it was that she saw. But I had always assumed that they were smoking a joint. Right? But apparently what he had in mind was she saw some sort of sexual act going on between these two. And back in 1972, it was against the law what the mama saw. So
yeah, it was. Yeah.
He said
unbelievably,
he said he never gave it more thought as to specifically what it was, but he thought something sexual, probably. Yeah, and it's had a couple of interesting references, pop culture references, and one of them was the radical priest who came to get him released, and they were all on the cover of Newsweek, right?
Yeah,
and that was probably a reference to a radical priest. In this, the Berrigans were kind of a spearhead of a type of Catholic priest that had come up through the ranks and been radicalized in the 60s, and said, well, what Christianity is something a lot different than what the church has been doing. And we need to go in a different
Sure.
So the radical priests, these are kind of the prototype radical priests, right?
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, they've been radicalized by Vatican II, radicalized by the culture that surrounded them, radicalized by Vietnam. The Berrigans, I think, are the public face of this type of radicalization. I think you're absolutely right. They were. It's amazing, actually, think about it. They really were household names, and not just in Catholic households. The Berrigans were really well-known figures, controversial figures, not necessarily beloved figures in many quarters, but extremely well-known.
And I think this plays into the idea that Christianity can be a cool thing. It can be a moment of rebellion, and I think this is the sort of thing that appealed to the youth of the time, and made that possible.
I think it's an interesting point. I think it's one we have talked about briefly before, but it's the notion, right, at the late 60s, early 1970s, there is this idea of the politicalization of religion. You talk about figures like Jesus, who perceived by many to be sort of the ultimate hippie, the ultimate counterculture figure.
Right.
And you're also suggesting that religion there's a kind of hipness to it. That it's cool to be engaged in faith in this era. I mean, it can be. So I mean, the song is so interesting in that it's a kind of streetscape song. This is the thing that Paul Simon has made a career of. Just he knows the neighborhoods, and you just get this. The flavor is just even like the whistle. It's just there's something about this song that's just so infectious. Well,
he's a storyteller and a consummate songwriter.
100%.
Has been producing just wonderful stuff for decades, and for me, this belongs in that set of things. Just a fantastic song.
I wouldn't disagree. So there we have it at number 24. Paul Simon's "Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard." One more song. Speaking of consummate storytellers. He's a relative unknown at this point, but it's Harry Chapin at number 28 with his single "Taxi," which is one of the great story songs really of all time. "Taxi," which clocks in at a little over 6.5 minutes. It's the song, of course, of a taxi driver coming into contact with an old lover. Whose lives have sort of taken sort of interesting, if not sort of problematic directions. There's a lot about this song that is sort of quintessential Harry Chapin. Chapin, who made his bones on the folk circuit in the early 70s, became kind of popular figure in the 1970s with songs like "Taxi," songs like "Cats in the Cradle," which peaked at number one.
Also a storyteller, right? I mean,
yeah, very much a story. I mean, almost all of his songs are like this. There's a certain kind of yarn that's embedded in all of them. I mean, Chapin was his big break actually came on the Tonight Show in this year, where he appeared to rapturous applause. And apparently, so the story goes, the Tonight Show was besieged with cards and letters. This is how people communicated back in the day, and telegrams, this kind of thing. And they brought him back the next night, which in the history of the Tonight Show up to that point had never happened. And so by popular demand, Harry Chapin appeared the next night. There's a certain autobiographical quality to this song. He talked about this. He did, he was a taxi driver for a short time and this kind of thing. There was a woman that he had a relationship with. There was a Sue, but much of this is really kind of fictional or exaggerated, but that doesn't really take away from the poignancy of the song. And it was, I think by many measures, this is sort of the song that he is best known for, along with "Cats in the Cradle." This particular song peaked at number 24. He wrote, years later, a sequel to it titled "Sequel," which also I think was more or less sort of equally successful. Chapin himself was an activist, particularly in causes dealing with homelessness and hunger, and was really, really well known in this regard. He tragically passed away in a car accident in 1981, but I think he's still really fondly remembered in this for a number of reasons, but particularly for "Taxi." So here we go at number 28. Okay, so we want to get to really one of the things that's happening in mid-May 1972, and we have over the past months, those of you who have watched this show religiously, and I know there are some of you who have, we've talked a lot about the Partridge Family, and the Partridge Family, again, this fictional family, music, play music and whatnot. There was this show on the ABC, quite popular. And the Partridge Family, the fictional Partridge Family, also then sort of released records. They didn't sort of release records, they released records. And a couple of members, hit makers, a couple of members of the Partridge Family, namely Shirley Jones and David Cassidy, actually participated in the recording of these records. But they had a lot of chart success. I mean, it's fair to say that 1971 in particular was an enormous year for Partridge Family, sold a lot of records. So Dave, you want to talk a little bit about then the David Cassidy phenomena. So the breakout star clearly on the Partridge Family was with David Cassidy in his young 20s. So what would be David? What is David Cassidy's story in the context of sort of the Partridge Family in this era?
Well, they were casting for this show, and uh, this goes back to other formula shows. We're going to come up with a rock band, and we're going to tell a story about them. Starr with the Monkees was also incredibly successful. So where there's success, there is repetition, and the Partridge Family came into that. Kind of had the Cowsills, another family band, as that's the model of this. But the people that they hired to act, nobody thought these are going to be the people who are making the music. That was never the concept. But David Cassidy was hired to play the part of Keith Partridge, the oldest son and the lead singer, lead guitarist of the group.
Right.
And he asked, well, can I take a stab at it? Let me try to record. And he did. And they found that he was actually pretty good. So they decided that he was going to be the voice of Keith Partridge in the recordings. And that was the beginning of a huge phenomenon, because David Cassidy was an extremely attractive young man, had a nice voice, and was the guy every 10-year-old kid wanted to be, every 10-year-old boy wanted to be, and the guy that every girl from 8 to 16 wanted to have as their.
So I think so. Yeah, I think you laid it out nicely. I think so. To some degree, Cassidy's success or breakout success in the Partridge Family was a bit of an accident, in that it wasn't really the intention for him to become both the face and the voice of the Partridge Family, but this is what had happened. And so the show then takes the air. They start releasing these albums. These albums are very successful. We're talking top 10 singles, top 10 LPs. I mean, they were selling a lot of records. And Cassidy then has his own fame outside the Partridge Family. And so he is now in the early 70s, not only participating in the show, participating in the recording, but also has a solo career. And so he would leave the set late in the week, fly to wherever the shows were being held, his solo shows were being held, even in Europe, on the weekend, and then fly back Monday, Tuesday, right, to start the next episode of the Partridge Family. And it was a very grueling enterprise. It just wore him to the nub. It was just, he was exhausted.
And the interesting part about these concerts is they were extremely well. I think he sold out very often, if not always.
Yes.
And but the thing is, the audience was made up of prepubescent girls and
Largely
mothers.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
And mothers. Yeah.
So he never had much of that groupie thing going on. And when he did, it was a little creepy. I mean,
a little bit.
The groupies that were approaching him and wanting to get together with him were just mostly way too young.
So, yeah, that's right. And so he has this sort of weird, he's in this weird place where he is a star, but he is not really seen, he's not really respected by peers. He does, as you're suggesting, his fan base is, I think, largely prepubescent. And it's sort of this odd place. He's sort of Mr. Tiger Beat magazine. And I think he longs for more.
Well, and even there, that population, that demographic, and the target audience of Tiger Beat, the publishers were saying, well, David Cassidy is today, but he's not tomorrow. We have Donny Osmond now.
Yes.
Well, more interesting, and this is the way we're going to be going. So
I think
he's already on the way.
I think that's a key point. I mean, they are Osmond is something like 10 years younger than Cassidy at this point. It's an odd thing that David Cassidy is like 22 years old and might be already sort of yesterday's news. And so there's a lot. Nobody is completely convinced or completely sure about what led into all of this. But it is the case that Cassidy agreed, the Rolling Stone was interested, and Cassidy agreed to be interviewed. And so this is the cover of Rolling Stone in mid-May 1972. And I guess we could just talk a little bit about the cover. And so this is the cover shot. This is Cassidy, who is naked. This is taken by the great Annie Leibovitz, who was who's still active, and during this era was really very closely associated with Rolling Stone and Rolling Stone covers. And again, this is the era, Dave, where if you're on the cover of the Rolling Stone, so the old Dr. Hook song goes, right, that you somehow made it.
Right.
And so in an interesting sort of way, this is the apex for Cassidy. He is on the cover of the Rolling Stone. You can't get bigger than this. The issue, well, there are a number of issues here. One is the photograph itself, which runs counter to his image, his relatively, if not completely squeaky clean image. You can't really see it here, but you get a little glimpse of pubic hair at the very base of the photo in some of the covers. But the interview itself, which may be mild by today's standards, but was salacious and jaw-dropping in 1972, where he talks at length about his daily routine, which involves lots of alcohol. He's smoking a joint while in conversation with the Rolling Stone reporter. Again, very much sort of against type in terms of the character he plays. He describes then the screaming and at his concerts and the sticky seats that his young fans leave behind. There's a lot here that's a little, well, it's a little problematic from his handler's perspective, and so the article is, I think, at best dismissive of his fans, if not outright contempt, held them in contempt. And I think he is clearly trying to sort of destroy the Keith Partridge image, completely just bury it. And in that regard, he sort of pulls the ripcord on Keith Partridge, and he doesn't really have a plan B. This article, I think it's safe to say, kills his career. Just kills it. And that he never really recovered from. David Cassidy, we don't have to go through the entire David Cassidy saga. He lived until 2017. He had very public bouts with alcoholism, and he had a number of stumbles in terms of his career. But when you read the obituaries from his death in 2017, the first paragraph, of course, is his participation in the Partridge Family and Teen Idol and all that. The second paragraph, is this Rolling Stone piece, where it describes then how he subverted his own career, an unprecedented act at this point in entertainment history. And he buried himself.
Yeah. Although, arguably, this could have been the jumping off point of a new image, a new David Cassidy, and a new direction for music as a rock, or at least a hard pop sort of icon. But if you're going to do that, you require the kind of music that brings you there. And he was recording things like "Cherish," which was a tepid remake of the Association, I think.
That's right. No, that's it. No, that's right.
Did it? And even their version was okay. We talked about my tolerance for saccharin. It doesn't go that far.
Well, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's saying something. Given the things that you actually like, but yes, his solo albums are terrible. They're really not very good. In fact, I don't think they're as strong as even the Partridge Family work. I don't think it is. And so what you're suggesting is it could have been, I think maybe even was perceived as being, again, this great launching point, into this next phase of his career, where he is in fact a kind of maybe even a kind of, rock god in the making. He has all the qualities, except maybe the talent, and certainly except the material. I mean, his choice of material is just abysmal, and he disappears. The Partridge Family then lumbers on for another season and a half, and then that's it. It's one of the odder things. I guess one of the questions that what comes to my mind, though, is why, in fact, Rolling Stone went down this road. I think we can see where maybe strategically Cassidy hoped to sort of make this happen and take this next step. But why the hell would Rolling Stone spend 5 minutes worrying about David Cassidy unless they were simply looking to sort of kind of take down a teen idol, to a kind of hit piece? I mean, what do you think? Why?
I think that's the answer. I think that's the answer right there. I think they held this type of artists in contempt.
Yes.
I think they think that
Completely.
their target audience holds this type of artist in contempt, which I think was an accurate assessment of their readership. So yeah, if he's going to let us go there, let's go there.
Yeah. So I mean, so they open the door and he walks through. And so it is. We'll put a link to the article itself in our playlist. It is, and also in the reading list. It is, again, it seems a little tame by 21st century standards, but this completely blew up the Keith Partridge image, and it really laid bare what was happening in part of the music industry, just in terms of sort of how pre-planned many things were, and sort of the designs that the record companies and stuff would have in terms of sort of offering the next big thing. And while this had been going on in the record industry for decades at this point, there was something about this that just seemed really unseemly. And I think Rolling Stone was more than willing, frankly, eager to sort of pull back the curtain, and by God they did. And so it's hard not to see this. It's hard not to feel bad for Cassidy, because this was not his intent, I don't think, to just pull the ripcord on his career and in some ways just start this decades-long tumble. But this is what happened.
Well, or maybe at least subconsciously it was.
Yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, right. I mean, he wants off the Partridge Family train, but oh boy, he got more than that. That's for sure. And so there we have it. It's mid-May 1972, and it's just going to get more interesting as we get into the summer of 1972. Not only do we have really amazing music, but also the politics of 1972 becomes much more important, much more significant, because this is an election year. This is a presidential election year, and the only Richard Nixon is running for re-election. And there's also, Watergate, which is going to take place very soon.
Right, which plays an incredibly minor role in the
absolutely
election. Yep, but
there you have it. And so
back to bite him in the butt later. Yeah,
you got that right. And so there we have it. So Dave, why don't you go ahead and take us home here?
All right. We hope you enjoyed this little trip down nostalgia lane. If you like this sort of thing, you can get it anytime by subscribing right here. We have other videos of 50 years ago this month right up here. And the all-important playlists for this month can be found right here.
There we go. Don't forget, there's a reading list each month, as well as then we are tweeting each day, Stephen Daves 1 at Twitter, Stephen Daves 1. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.